Jim Joyce.
We did it. We did it. We're in.
I saw a buddy of mine who is not in digital health, but apparently watches these episodes, and he said that his favorite. Yeah, I guess learning. I mean, he's in banking, but I guess he's tracking some healthcare companies and stuff like that. So, but he says like the favorite part is Jim Joyce. The rest he doesn't listen to. So we got to keep doing that. At least
you got to start high, and then crash, bore the tears off of them afterwards. Now I saw you had lunch. You sent lunch with our buddy there. Can you tell everyone they had lunch with Top Shelf?
Yeah, well, actually it was dinner, and hence dinner. Honestly, I mean, it's tough. It's 1:30 p.m. And I, drinking the shot now, and the day is still packed, so I'm saving them for dinners now. So I did have a drink or two.
No, I'm saying that's what we call Bill Taranto. We call him
the Top Shelf. That's right, the Top Shelf Bill Taranto. Sorry. Yeah. And then who else? I saw right before, just happened to be Ed Cox was in town also, from Eversana. So he flew in from San Diego too. So I actually drove down to kind of PA, New Jersey border. And it's kind of weird to be out and you sort of still don't know what to do, like shake this.
Yeah, it sounds like you seem like you have kind of a semi-normal life, not, as much as...
Yeah, especially, it's been, 2 weeks since I've got my second vaccination and all of that. So I'm kind of as clear as we can. Right. But anyway, and you're back to Ireland.
I'm back in Dublin. I'm delighted. I was 3 weeks on the road, just with all the hassle of flying. So that was just fantastic to get back to Dublin and just chill out. I'm looking to take a swim in the cold sea and it's nice and sunny here. I've heard there's a heat wave where you are.
It is. I'm sitting in. This is why I'm not in the garage today. I mean, even with a fan, I needed to move up in the world a little. So it's hot.
I think we can't track, like, you and I try to comment on like any big news items, but we're both moving 1 million miles per hour. The news is moving 1 million miles per hour. So digital health is just like, someone described it as like, it's like the.
My only comment, and maybe I'll take this down, like, what is really digital health, right? Like the bright IPO, right? It's like, is it really digital health? It's an insurance player, right? Like I'm struggling. So let actually, because our Dutch friend living in Madrid is going to join us, Edward Kliphuis, and he's a brilliant mind. And I had him on our wonderful DTX podcast. Excellent. So figured, and I hope he's wearing a nice shirt or something. I don't know.
Right.
All right. Nice. Welcome. Don't say anything because we're already recording. We're almost live.
Hey, Ed, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. You guys know each other? You've met? I'm just trying to make sure, or no? Through HealthXL somehow? No?
I think. Yeah, through a couple of the events and things. I mean, we definitely had a beer together. Yeah, I was saying you look like you've gotten trimmer or thinner during COVID, or you're saying or I said it already. I already did the C word.
Dude, I mean, we gave up on it, so I don't know.
But you were totally. I think we were on a panel, maybe. Was that possible? We were on a panel together.
That's right. Yeah.
Used to be panel buddies back when you
get
two men on a panel. You could have two men on a panel.
good old days of panels and conferences. But I'm hearing it's coming back, and I know HealthXL is doing something in Dublin and Boston now.
Yeah.
Frontiers Health is gonna go hybrid, but this November, HLTH in October in Boston. So, a lot of things are HIMSS, which I'm not going to, and I don't know that many people who are in August.
Emerge in March. It's a new conference in the Gulf.
That's right. Well, now that we've pimped out a couple of them, let's get to you, Mr. Kliphuis. While you were sort of I was letting you in, I said our Dutch friend who's living in wonderful Madrid. But give 1 million of listeners a little more in your background.
I guess the long and short of it is, Dutch, fled the country quite soon after graduation, went to Switzerland, actually joined the Merck corporate venture arm at that point. Then in some random fluke of events, actually.
Which Merck? You got to specify for the.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, where is this going to be broadcast? This is
everywhere. This is global.
Global,
man.
baby, global.
That's the
global.
problem. Merck KGA, Darmstadt, Germany.
There you
That's
go.
the one.
That's the one.
So yeah, was there when the original corporate venture arm was being set up in Geneva. Then actually moved to Singapore for a while. Lived in back to Geneva. Then spent time between London and Amsterdam. Ended again up in M Ventures, so the corporate venture arm of Merck KGA, Darmstadt, Germany.
Right.
And yeah, then moved to Spain at some point. And I guess that's the uninteresting part. I mean, the interesting part we can also touch on, which is, you know, the random events that sort of like led there, and you know, I guess some of the things that people don't know about you, like for example, me having been arrested in Azerbaijan and stuff
What?
like that.
Where are we going? I like this.
That's the more interesting part of this conversation.
The many years I've known, I've never heard this story, even over a drink. But
and you're the first person. You're the first person, or maybe second person I know that's been arrested in Azerbaijan. Maybe second.
So actually, that makes me wonder who the first person is, and if I ever can ask you for an intro there.
But give us like, I don't know, 10 seconds on it at least. You can't just like, it's like a cliffhanger.
Was there a Eurovision contest? Eurovision contest.
I was like, I know Eugene for such a long time. Like, what can I say right now that would like completely throw him off? And this was the one thing I'm rooting on.
I don't even want to talk about digital health. This is it. This is the topic for today.
So yeah, no, long story short, we basically did the Mongol Rally, which was a rally from London to Mongolia. And being arrested is probably a big word, but I was definitely held for having unfortunately overextended my welcome in the country. So we got in and the visa had expired. Me being the technical owner of the car, we basically wanted to cross into Kazakhstan. But unfortunately, there was no ferry because little did we know there aren't any ferries. You have to basically just get your way onto like a freighter or something like that. So by the time we basically got to that point, you know, I was caught out with a non-valid visa any longer, and so I had to extend that. And you know, that was interesting. All right. 24 hours. Let's put it like that.
That's good. It's good. I think it's important. That's an important event in your. Was it shaping in your life and how you think about things? And did you reflect on?
So actually, you know what? So. Okay, now I'm going to take 2 minutes for this because this is an interesting story. So basically, what did shape me of that whole journey was, you know, the preparation of getting there was quite an arduous event because we had to plan out all the visa, and you know, this is not like you're flying into a country and getting in and leaving at the same port of embarkation and disembarkation. You basically go in through a land border on one side and you go out on another side. And some of these countries are extremely hard to get into, let alone get that sort of transit visa for. So we had planned that meticulously, you know, with a team of 3, like how can we get all these visas in place and sort of like with the right time frame to get to Mongolia. So I was in investment banking at the time, and I could only get 4 weeks off, and my mates got 5 weeks off. So I flew to London, we basically saw them off, and then I was meeting them in Istanbul. Now I'm following this tracker, this GPS responder that's mounted on the bonnet of the car while I'm sitting behind my Bloomberg screen. And at some point this thing stops in Budapest, and then it leaves Budapest and they go back, and I'm like, damn, what's going on? So I'm calling them up. Turns out a backpack was stolen from the car, and one of our mates' passports, including all his visas, was in there. So he got a replacement passport. Now, luckily, he had a second passport, and we basically, I'll spare you all the details, but we managed to get all the visas that were required to basically get to our goal, which was highly unlikely. I got some interesting tricks that I learned along the way there. And what it has taught me, including this sort of like, you know, making your way out of a let's call it a bit of a tight spot in Azerbaijan, is that really nothing is impossible, and you know, as long as you believe in it. And I like to think that I at least bring that sort of like idea to my day-to-day work as well.
So like Jim, you know how you asked the question at the end,
right,
for all our guests? Maybe we start now, because this sounds like a very much a persistent startup story, right? Like
I know, definitely, but I want to unpack because. Like, I think of you at like when, you know, like I think when I met you at the HealthXL event, you were M Ventures and you had done some, you know, so you guys were kind of like, that was kind of one of the early digital health funds, right? Like focusing like give us a little bit, you know, unpack that a little bit, entering the digital health space. Like, how'd you get here?
Yeah, we actually, so M Ventures, the genesis of it, really, I have to give credit where credit is due. I mean, my former boss, Rule, I don't know what he did, but he managed to convince a traditional German pharmaceutical firm to actually allocate 40 million to high risk venture capital in 2009, which again, amazing how he managed to do that. Yeah. But it was really a good opportunity for us because we were, able to basically invest at a time when nobody else was really ready to deploy. That was great. Now, one of the original investments there was a deal called Oxygen, and that later on became Progeny. So as early as the second investment,
which later on for the listeners went public last year,
and is now worth a couple of billion on Nasdaq. Yeah. And so as early as 09, I guess we sort of like already looked at things at that point that were called health IT, and now of course digital health. So it was sort of in the DNA. Now, when I came back in 2014, originally we were investing in therapeutics only, but at some point we had a conversation with the Merck board, and all of us agreed that the value that was derived from this therapeutics investment activity for the Merck pharmaceutical franchise was really tremendous. And so they asked us to establish a similar strategy for each of the other business units of the Merck group. And in addition, an investment fund that basically would capture, let's say, everything that would fall in between or go beyond what the other funds could do. And that's where we did a lot of this healthcare technology or digital health investment from. And so Akili was really the first one. Yep. And after that, we continued with investing in BioLink and Altoida. We made investments in companies like Sonda Health, which basically have novel biomarker development, MediSafe, medication management, and really did like 11 deals out of that fund.
Right. But don't you just touching on Akili for a second, isn't that like the coolest investment ever? Like a game, that kids are allowed to play to deal with their attention deficit disorder. Doesn't it just start with don't you just start you want to make that investment, thesis?
So it's on top of an Eddie, right? I mean,
yeah.
Great guy, right? Just
I don't know him that well. I know it. Yeah.
in the Venn diagram of things that are interesting, that's set right there in the middle of this has everything. It has an impact in outcomes. It is evidence-based, and I guess another thing that you perhaps don't know about me, I spent my the late 90s and the early 2000s playing Unreal Tournament online, and was actually rather good at it. We won Capture the Flag European Championship at some point. And so as a bit of a geek in DNA, I'm seeing this game and then all these scientific things that are sort of backing it up. I'm like, this is everything. This is everything I love. I have to be involved in this.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic, man. That's another thing I think I just learned about you again. You're just.
I've been preparing for this. You can see that, right?
Yeah. Even though we're meticulously unproduced, but
are you guys are you two the Spanish kind of expat, digital health gurus? Because are you going to stay in Madrid with this new job, or we haven't talked about that?
Oh wait, yeah, we haven't even brought that up. Wait, is this the first time anybody outside of your circle, the millions of viewers that we have, going to hear this? Well, why don't you announce it here already? Yeah.
So I can either confirm or deny, but there is a chance that maybe tomorrow, indeed, I'll be joining Sofinnova Partners in Paris. Yes.
Okay, so midnight. It's got a couple hours, by the time we'll release it, you will be officially an employee. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. So so that's a storied, I think of biotechnology, healthcare, right? Obviously, lots of aspects of it, but I'm not sure what you can say about it because you don't want to get yourself in trouble on your first day on the job. but it sounds like a good job.
Yeah. No. Look. I mean, it's actually quite awesome. I mean, Sofinnova is in recent years basically launched an ambitious strategy of expanding beyond its historical base, their historical base of investing in therapeutics. And so in just a few years, you can see that this platform has gone from just one fund and one investment and one office to basically 5 strategies, 5 investment teams, 3 offices, and it is very clear that it won't stop there. So this diversification has really enabled the firm to strengthen its position as a pioneer in life sciences. And I guess it is therefore promising to see what potential future opportunities might be part of this platform as well.
But I'm gonna just hypothesize here, given Edward's background, and I'll just leave it at that. We'll I guess we'll hear soon enough. We need to bring you back at some point. So let's.
Yeah, go ahead. You go.
No, go.
No, I was saying, like, what part of the, like, having done all these investments over the time, like you know, don't have to get into what stage you're going to be at, but like what stage of the investment do you love? Like, do you really like? I'm assuming you'll say it's the one you're working on now, but what stage?
For me, it's definitely like, late seed, Series A stage, because see, I mean, this comes maybe down to sort of a personal philosophy, but venture capital is not an end goal in and of itself. It is basically an equal partnership. And, as much as I guess founders need to trust their investors need to trust the founders. And I find that dialogue to be best had at that sort of like earlier stage, whereas the real seed stage might be a little bit too early for my personal taste. But like the pre-seed and everything, I find that a little bit, it's too binary. You're really, there's nothing to diligence. And given that we're managing other people's money, I kind of always need to have something to sink my teeth into. But frankly, the late seed or Series A stage where you have something to diligence, you can build up confidence, you can say, actually, I believe the direction we're going, yet you still have that very personal relationship with the team. And it is a team effort to really grow that company forward, and to ultimately get to product market fit. That's, I get really excited about that.
Yeah, it's kind of a magical moment, isn't it? That if you think about it, no matter what the investment strategy is, but that kind of moving to like, oh shit, we can actually, we've got something repeatable here. We've got something we can diligence. It's kind of, the team is kind of, they can feel it. You can feel it.
It's like, can that team get to Kazakhstan no matter what? Basically,
it's exactly that. Like,
you lost a few visas.
Exactly.
Backpacks been stolen.
You find all of a sudden, a bottle of vodka in your backpack halfway through the desert of Kazakhstan, which, not bad. Stuff like that.
Yeah, but it is a magical. It is a magical stage, because if you think about like when you first kind of go into it, that's kind of magical too, right? Like when you kind of step off and you do that like initial founder stuff, that's kind of like, because everything's possible, and then you get pretty much depressed until the stage you come in. Pretty much.
And then you get another depression and another one, right? Until maybe at some point.
I mean,
you guys know better than me.
We even talked about this, Jim, I think. I mean, there's the famous, the startup cartoon. It's like,
right.
Fuck, yay, right? And yay. And it's
I think for me, indeed, the thing is, especially as a VC investor, you kind of, you're putting your balls on the line together, and you're seeing it all the way through, and that is something which, especially in the early stages, I think you're making a bet on a nucleic piece of technology and a nucleic team, and ultimately, hopefully, together you can bring these things forward, and then look at the world afterwards and say, see, I was right. That's kind of cool.
I want to dive into something that I don't think we've ever talked about with any of the guests, but especially in digital health or in healthcare. I don't even know what digital health means anymore, right? Like Bright went public, it's an insurance, or it's a large digital health. I don't know. Yeah, there's digital technologies everywhere. But anyway, that's a side note.
Don't sweat it. Just go with it.
Yeah, I'm just going with it. All right, I'm not sweating it. But let's talk about boards, right? And the role, and especially at that stage, what you said, right, between the seed and Series A, and the role of the board members. I don't think we ever talked. Like, what would you recommend startups, Edward, on how to deal with the boards, right? How to, to a certain extent, even some of the. I'll pause. You got the question, man. Because I can keep going and going.
I think, what, I hate that this is such a completely underlit subject, because it is so fundamental. And I think a lot of people underestimate the importance of it. Now, there's no golden rule, but I personally am in favor of at least having small and balanced boards, especially in early stages. So, rule of thumb, seed, Series seed, maybe 3 board members, Series A and B, maybe 5 board members. If you go beyond that, you can add people and it can become a little bit more heavy. Because also your directional decisions are going to be less binary. You're not going to say we're going to bet the farm on just taking a U-turn here. At that point, hopefully you've raised on having demonstrated product market fit. So then the composition, I think, I think it's very important to have investor representation. And of course I would say that, but I mean, I also personally think that the investors bring a sense of fiduciary obligation, that basically value needs to be generated for shareholders, and a level of accountability that is just important in a governance body, because this is governance. Now, what I mean by that very concretely, investors will look, okay, we have agreed on a budget. Are you underspending? Are you overspending? And by the way, underspending is not a good thing, because money needs to be put to work. Spending on budget is a good thing. So are you underspending? Are you overspending? Are you on budget? Are the timelines slipping? If so, why? Why are these timelines slipping? Is this something that comes from, let's say, managerial oversight, or is it just a macro setback that couldn't have been foreseen, but that we all agreed we have to now mitigate? So it's things like that you need to have very honest conversations about. And I think a lot of people see this as almost punitive, but that's not what it is. I think the best founders I work with embrace this, because it's almost like the proverbial frog that you throw in cold water and gradually you heat up the pan. If you're in the weeds of it, oftentimes you don't even realize a drift in timelines or budget or whatever. And so having people coming in every once in a while, almost fresh, quote unquote, and saying, hey, what's going on, can really make for productive decisions and productive discussions. So that's the investor side. Then personally, I think founders should be represented, which in Europe is not always the case, but preferably a CEO, and especially in the early stages, perhaps a co-founder. And then I personally like to have an independent board member, because especially in early stages, somebody who can bring a level of governance to, oftentimes we work with first-time founder teams, who basically says, look, I've done this 3 times. I know the level of governance that need to be instilled, what a board deck needs to look like, how you need to communicate with your shareholders, and sort of like can function as that pivot, almost a lightning rod between the two. I think makes for a very productive conversation. If you abdicate that responsibility of time management in a board meeting, having to have dialogues with all investors constantly to a CEO, I think it makes the CEO is almost overburdened. Whereas if you have an executive chair or a chair there, it puts a neutral factor in the middle that makes for a very productive and almost non-personal for the wrong reasons relationship. And then personally, I like to have an independent board member in there. So that's sort of the 5. So 2 investors, maybe an independent board member, a founder, CEO, whomever, and an independent who can really provide value.
Sounds good.
Free advice to all the startups listening in. There you go.
Yeah, because like when I think about this, it's like anything. It's a team, right? Like so you have all those, like that lovely explanation of your roles, where the financiers bring a level of discipline and accountability to the capital and this pace and the strategy, right? And then the founders obviously bring in the company, right, to the table, and the company to the table, and don't overlook the founder. And then this neutral person is kind of like helping bridge that. But like, it's one of those things, like, even if you have that team, if the people aren't performing, like we're all watching the Euro Cup here, if the person's not playing their position, then no matter what that is, right? If that neutral body can't bridge the two, or leans one way or the other, or the financier overreaches, or the entrepreneur doesn't let it happen.
And I know you didn't ask this question now, but I think, following sort of like the outline of the team, I think diving into the responsibilities and understanding what the individual drivers are is fundamental for this. So as, if you're a founder, I would almost say it is almost your duty to understand what the rationale is for, your board members to be there, because that's your governance body. And for example, if somebody doesn't understand, the difference between fiduciary obligation towards the company versus fiduciary obligation towards a fund, that's hard. If somebody is in a fund as an investor, perhaps, and is on the way out, then you might have a very solid relationship with this individual, but he or she might be replaced by somebody else.
Right. Brian Dolan called it an orphaned company, right? Because if the board member that you trust, and I think, I don't remember if that was on our GTX podcast with Brian or one of the other guests, but yeah. By the way, I know we're meticulously unproduced. I don't know where your mic is, Ed, but it seems like it's like almost like you're in the wind every time you talk. So just for our listeners. Okay, there we go.
It's 35 degrees here in Madrid, and I don't have aircon in the office. So
let's see him sweat. Let's see him sweat.
Yeah, the sweat.
I can safely claim that you're not pressuring me, right?
We had a lot of tough questions. This is a tough.
So we actually, I think the next question I wanted to ask, because I know you were looking globally with M Ventures. I don't know what the scope will be with Sofinnova. But let's talk about digital health startups in Europe. And we had this discussion with Lina, Wenner from First Minute, also a bit on scaling digital health startups, and lots of European companies get something moving, whether it's Netherlands or Belgium or Germany, and then they all open up an office in US. Not all, I'm stereotyping, but I know you have your deep thoughts on this, and let's extract it now that the heat is on.
It is actually getting significantly hotter right now, so yes.
We like it.
Okay, well, you can turn it on and off just to cool yourself down a bit. But.
Exactly. No, listen, I think that's the $1 million question. Personally, I think on the technology push part of it. The technology push part of it, Europe is fantastic. I mean, we have the most PhD graduates in the world in science and engineering. Fantastic, academia that actually, if you correct for impact factor, have the highest proportion of high impact factor publications in the world. So on the scientific level, I think it's actually fantastic here. Then on the early stage venture side, I think it is also fantastic. Now, under the bonnet of early stage venture funds, though, you'll find that a lot of sovereign wealth funds are in there. And the majority of them will ask in return for their capital a quid pro quo of only allocating venture money, for example, 1 or 2 times their committed capital in their home market. So that's already, it doesn't have to be a jeopardizing factor for growth or scale up, but it could be. So that's already one of them. Now, so I'm very bullish on Europe in sort of technical innovation and science coming out of it and the opportunities that we can back. And the thesis that I, at least like to sort of like think where we've been executing on is if you play fundamental human biology, let's take Akili again, for example, upregulation of cognition by inducing neuroplasticity, so changing the prefrontal cortex, essentially the connections. That's the same for an individual in Europe as it is for an individual in the States, as it is for an individual in Africa, Asia, bloody Antarctica. So if you're playing fundamental human biology, then the scalability is, just as big as you want it to be. That's why I think actually Europe is a fantastic opportunity to seek innovation and scaling globally. Now, scaling within Europe, that's a different question. And I think the challenge there is, in one word, fragmentation along any level. And it starts with, if you think about why, by and large, people are still employed by larger corporates rather than by startups in the whole of Europe, it is probably because the opportunity cost of moving countries, as you have done, as I have done, is just high. And if you think about that in the US, you can go from Minnesota to Boston, your bank account stays the same, your cell phone stays the same, your kids have the same kind of education, maybe in a different place, but kind of. Whereas if you do the same and you move from, I don't know, the Netherlands to Spain, like I did, it's a different thing.
I still was shocked when I moved to Spain that I can't just give my Revolut account, right? Like for automated payments, they need a Spanish bank account. And I'm like, why?
Really?
But side note.
It's crazy. It's absolutely bonkers in these things. So there's all these kind of like, I think, mobility issues that therefore, create an additional hurdle to get people to come and be all together. Now, COVID might have corrected for that, but I think in fundamental science, you might still need people to move to a certain location. So that's perhaps one. Then the second one is, regulation. And the third one will be capitalism, sort of the capitalist markets. If you think about the US, you know, I was listening to Glen's podcast on W2F.
With just DaMassa, it's
yeah.
in my queue. I haven't watched it yet.
Great interview, and you know, Transcarent is he's doing great things, but that model is very hard to replicate in Europe, because if you go to the NHS here, that's a single payer system, they're just not interested. So the pricing power is different, and that's why I think for a lot of these point solutions, you'll find, or even experiences, you'll find that the US is the place to be, because, for example, as you well know, I don't get to choose my healthcare here necessarily. I get to choose an insurer, but then that's kind of it. Like, they kind of like choose the package for you. And in the Netherlands, there's not even a choice. You just go to the GP and that's about it. So that's the scaling problem. I think there's the decision-making, the disconnect between those who benefit, those who pay, and those who need to adopt.
You know, also, like we're just seeing right now is like where the capital is, you know. So if you have, you know, if you have companies, like I always think, like with my own company, with Health Beacon, that, you know, I remember trying to raise capital when I was first seeding the company and trying to do both the US and Irish investors, and it just was incompatible. Like, it wasn't incompatible if, you know, if we had a, you know, a patent on, you know, the coronavirus, sorry, second time, you know, but I
stopped counting.
but I mean, if you had something that was just like, you know, everyone was throwing money in, but you have a new idea and you're through, it was incompatible. You know, I could have raised in the US, or I could have raised in Europe. And then as the company got bigger, then it, you know, when I looked to talk to VCs, they wanted me almost like center of gravity had to move to the US, yet we were getting traction in Europe, and they almost discounted the traction in Europe. So you know, you just needed to talk with those investors largely on US terms. So, like, you know, so the capital is US.
And now, Jim, you're a global company.
Now we're global, baby. Global.
But it's actually funny that you mentioned that, because you're absolutely right. It is even from the top down. From the top down, there's these challenges that, you know, is there a single pool of capital or a single stock market in Europe that would embrace all technology startups like a NASDAQ? No, there isn't. And it's been tried, by the way, the Euro NASDAQ or whatever it's called. And it's very hard. So you know, therefore there's no concentration of capital. Therefore, there's no diversification in the stock market. Like, I worked in the public markets for a while as a specialist, sort of brokering specialist stocks. And in Europe, by and large, people are organized by their geography. Whereas in the US, you'll find, you know, specialist investors like RA Capital, Baker Brothers, Perceptive on the public markets, who have such depth of knowledge that they can, you know, pinpoint biological mechanisms and everything. And the reason why they can do that is because there's so many more opportunities for them to back that they can be specialized.
And this is a great segue. This is a great segue.
Yeah, I was going to say public segments, public money. So let's talk SPACs.
Yeah.
I'm still dumbfounded, and I won't be mentioning the few SPACs. I don't think there was any SPACs this week so far, to my knowledge. Well, not the digital health SPACs that I've heard. Again, I haven't been paying attention, but somebody's gonna lose their shirt on some of these valuations.
Just wait a little while.
Yeah, I'm doing a health coach thing. You just ask the question and you pause, and you let others talk.
Let me ask you another question. What is value?
Value should be not tied to valuation. Just kidding.
But that's price and value are different things. I agree. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have read the book by Charles Mackey, Popular Delusions, and the Madness of the Crowds.
I have not.
This is a guy in what, the 19th century who made and lost his fortune like 3 times over. And he writes this book about, you know, bubble formations like the tulip mania and the South Sea bubble and everything. Brilliant read for people who are interested in this sort of stuff. Now, I don't know. I mean, SPACs are interesting, and who am I to say that they're good or not? I mean, I can see the appeal. You get a 4% pop for investors, which in a low interest rate world you simply can't get elsewhere. And if you don't like the acquisition target being presented, you know what? You get replaced and you still get your 4% pop. So that's it. But yeah, there is a bit of, you know, you're getting companies that are not publicly traded, that are not necessarily endorsed by the public, for going public. And
And
we'll see how it plays
that
out.
to me is that to me is interesting, right? If the fundamentals and the economics of a business are there, they go IPO through the more traditional or maybe less traditional, right? Depends on. But the SPAC, especially that 18 to 20 months that you have to fill it, and therefore we're looking at these sometimes subpar companies, and then again, right? So the early investors will make their money. I mean, there's a value extraction, go back to value, right? Component, but then the public will, in many cases, lose out.
Well,
because
so here's
some of the fundamentals and the math just doesn't add up for me.
Well, they can still go long AMC. All jokes aside, I mean, I think it's less about SPACs than it is about, you know, actual value. I think it's a much more systemic thing that's going on. Again, you know, the East India Company sort of was the first ones to be publicly traded, right? It was publicly traded because people were getting a share of the wealth that was being brought back to the Netherlands and then, you know, afterwards to other places. Now, we're a far cry from that today. I mean, as an investor in Tesla, you're not speculating on getting a distribution that would basically give you back a purchase price of your shares over a period of time. You're speculating on the price going up and somebody else at some point acquiring that. And, you know, there are dividend stocks, but maybe, you know, high dividends, what, 5%. So it takes you 20 years to make your investment back. So basically, you know, the disconnect between what is underlying value and what is basically being speculated on and priced in, I think that's the more concerning factor for me. And that's why I always find it so interesting when people, for example, say, you know, venture capital is so risky. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that. It is risky, but basically what we do is we buy oversized clothes for a very small child and we hope that the child grows into it. But isn't that what's happening on the stock market as well?
I like that.
That's a good comparison.
I like that. Versus usually sometimes the venture capitalists try to give the large entrepreneurs first communion suits. But if you think about the
that's
plan,
visual in my head now. Sorry, it sticks in my head. Go on.
You know you tried to do it. See if this will fit you, like Ben Affleck and Good Will Hunting. But if you think about, let's just cut to the chase, like Pear Therapeutics here, right? Like, you know, and I don't know if you're compromised anyway on this one, but like is what's being funded. Like when I was thinking about that, like it's a classic, you know, bear versus bull, right? Like it's like the cynics have so much to work with. You know, the doubters have so much to work with, right? You know, maybe the pragmatists, maybe practical people, maybe logical people, they have a lot to work with, you know, the investigators, right? But then you also have the bulls in the space, right? Like, and the people, the ambitious side of it. And it's a classic case that, you know, without getting into all the detail, and I don't know all the detail, but like really what's being funded is an incredibly, incredibly ambitious game plan, where you're talking about revolutionizing an aspect of how medicines are managed in a very digital way that doesn't happen today. You know, nascent distribution of digital therapeutics out there. And these guys are saying it's going to take a lot of money. And then if you take that view, it's a bit like the Tesla view. And, you know, again, without getting into detail of them, that's the classic battle.
And by the way, now then I think there was 400 million for Pear as part of this, and you can go and do some acquisitions and on you know, cash and stock, right, to fill in those pants or oversized suits. So.
Well, exactly. That's the thing, right? I mean, this is the interesting thing. If Pear can now buy scale inorganically, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's a strategy that private equity's been doing forever. So good on them. I don't know the nitty-gritty of the deal either. The only thing I can say is I think, you know, fantastically well done for Corey and the team, and being now on this route, I think is a, you know, hopefully they're one of the trailblazers. Hopefully it sets a precedent. Now, of course, if you read through the prospectus, you see what the projected revenues are. Yeah, that's a bit of a shocker. On the other hand, nobody sees what kind of work perhaps has been put into the platform. And I know firsthand from the work of some of the other companies that we invested in, that the go-to-market strategy is not something to be completely ignored. Like that is not trivial. And so the investment that has been made there is oftentimes not recognized by non-specialist investors because they're looking at top line and perhaps EBIT margins. Whereas since you have invested in the infrastructure, since you put your time and money to basically create all that infrastructure, all the picks and shovels, the rest of the products that come after it, they need that kind of scale and distribution power, and you all of a sudden become that. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's Pear's play. I don't know about that, but
Right.
I'm just saying like the picks and shovels, the data plays. That's the interesting part, I think, for me, where digital still has a lot of ground to cover.
Yep.
And so it's not unreasonable to infer that, you know, a Pear could well become a digital pharma instead of being a digital biotech as it perhaps is today. And people are not recognizing that yet.
And it becomes, you know, a huge component of the USP, and, you know, for other competitors, I mean, it took what, almost a decade to build what, and again, I don't know either what's behind the snes, right? But we should get Corey on here. Yeah.
You should get him on.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
So we're, you know, I mean, we can keep peeling the onion left and right and sideways. I'd like to get back to the Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan story, but I think we covered enough there. But I don't know, Jim, Joyce, do you want to go with your the final question?
So picture yourself a 30-year-old retired venture capitalist that's stuck trying to get out of detention in Azerbaijan, and you're contemplating launching your own digital healthcare company. What advice would you give that entrepreneur right now that was launching that digital health company in the year 2021?
Get a solid visa.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure you get a solid visa, and whatever you do, carry a lot of Marlboro packs red, because that's the bribery currency in that part of the world. I'm not endorsing smoking, by the way. I'm just saying that that's the currency in that part of the world.
Clear.
For border guards, that is, before I get vilified by all kinds of people. You know what? That's a difficult one. I guess the main advice for me is, I'm maybe a bit of an idealist, and what I look for is, there's a lot of companies out there that are playing regulation, and what I mean by that is, you know, regulators have defined that, for example, you have a sufficiently good product if you in 30 days move somebody from, you know, being pre-diabetic down to normal levels again and not becoming diabetic. But, you know, without follow-up, that person 3 months later is diabetic. So is that really creating the value that you want to create? What I'm trying to say is, for me, playing the fundamental values, playing the fundamental improvement in outcomes, the fundamental improvement in patient well-being, that's the part that gets me excited, because I'm a firm believer that, you know, coming back to what is value, that's in the end true value. When everything's said and done, if you can truly change the health outcome for individuals, and not just some regulatory threshold that's being said, but that is actually in real life meaningless, then that is something that people are willing to pay for.
I'm going to do 15,000 steps today.
I like it. I thought that's a great response. We haven't had that. That's fantastic.
Love it. Well, thank you for making the time. You got a couple of hours to count. Congrats on the new gig. Hopefully you sleep tight tonight, and for all the millions of listeners and viewers.
You've asked me now a couple of questions. So can I ask you guys one question then? What is out of this?
Wait! I'm gonna stop recording now.
Go ahead. But go ahead.
So out of all the interviews you've done, what has been sort of like your one takeaway observation that you would say, you know, if I were 30 years retired, whatever, this would be my advice? Because you guys have a lot of data points collected through this time.
It's true. It's true.
And we are going to try to digitize it, but so I think if we actually transcribe these interviews, I think team will come out. That level of persistence will come out. I think some of these traditional things that kind of sound cliche, but they're the real deal, right? It's people that are driving this. And so like a lot of the focus, it'd be actually interesting to rewind our 6 seasons just for that question alone.
Yep. Yeah, for me, it's when you do something new, you need friends, right? You know, like that from the Ratatouille quote. And so this has been the new needs friends. And so I think that's come out for me is that the enthusiasm, the persistence, the fact that keeping the network, the energy, like Eugene was asked on the last podcast, I asked the guy that worked with Eugene 10 years ago, what was it like working with him, 20 years ago? And he said,
and I stopped recording then too. No,
he said that Eugene said that lots of energy and anything was possible. So that's the quote I'll give you.
All right. I love
Awesome.
it. And we'll maybe get an intern to summarize the findings. That's actually a good point.
I think we should go algorithm, right?
We got like 60 people on, right? And amazing individuals. So
yeah,
cool, good stuff.
Awesome.
On that note, hit the subscribe and follow to get more insights from people like Edward Kliphuis. Over and out.